Hello. In this video, I will tell you stories about the most terrifying abandoned hospitals in human history, at least one of which you have likely never heard of before. The level of terror will increase with each story, so please do not miss out and watch until the end of the video. First is the Beelitz Heilstätten Hospital. In 1898, in the middle of a remote pine forest approximately 50 kilometers southwest of Berlin, the local authorities constructed a massive pulmonary tuberculosis treatment complex covering an area of 200 hectares. This was once the largest tuberculosis treatment facility in the world, with more than 1,200 hospital beds, designed to be completely self-sufficient with its own post office, bakery, and even its own power plant. Everything began to take on a gloomy tone in October of 1916. At this time, a 27-year-old Austrian corporal was brought here to be treated for a thigh wound caused by a grenade fragment from the Battle of the Somme. He stayed here for nearly 2 months and breathing the air of this place before becoming the terror of all humanity. That person was none other than Adolf Hitler. And during World War II, this place continued to serve as a major military hospital. By 1945, when the Soviet Red Army took over, Beelitz Heilstätten became the largest Soviet military hospital outside of its own territory. However, the true tragedy began when the Soviet Army withdrew in 1994, leaving behind a massive complex without any protection. This location became an ideal gathering place for criminal gangs. A serial killer nicknamed the Beast of Beelitz, Wolfgang Schmidt, committed at least 6 murders right in this area during the early 1990s. The brutality did not stop there. In 2007, a photographer named Michael K. lured a 20-year-old model named Anja P. into the abandoned building, murdered her, and then performed depraved acts with the body of the victim. Dozens of vast buildings completely without supervision became the perfect shroud for criminals to take advantage of to commit crimes without fear of being discovered. Today, a portion of the complex has been restored to serve as a treatment facility for Parkinson's disease. However, the majority of the area remains submerged in desolation and has become a film set for dark works such as The Pianist. The next is Pripyat Hospital number 126. This is the hospital belonging to the city of Pripyat, Ukraine, which was built in 1970 to serve the workers of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. At that time, Hospital number 126 was a modern medical facility with 410 hospital beds, featuring a full pediatric department, a maternity ward, and a dental office to serve nearly 50,000 residents. Everything proceeded normally until the early morning of April 26, 1986, at 1:23. That was when nuclear reactor number 4 of the Chernobyl power plant exploded. Within the next few hours, 108 firefighters and plant workers were brought into this hospital in a horrific condition. Their skin suffered from acute radiation burns, ended turning a purple color, and they vomited continuously. But because of the urgency and a lack of understanding about the danger level of radiation at that time, all of the heavily contaminated clothes, boots, and gloves of the firefighters were stripped off and thrown directly down to the basement of the hospital. Only 36 hours after the explosion, the order to evacuate the entire city was issued, and the hospital was left behind along with all the equipment, medical records, and personal items. As a result, 28 of those first victims died of acute radiation syndrome within just a few weeks. And the basement of hospital number 126 today is exactly the place that contains the breath of death. The uniforms from that night absorbed an extremely large amount of radiation. The radiation levels here are still recorded at 2 to 3 Röntgen per hour, causing danger to life after only a few minutes of exposure. Even experts have recorded radiation levels at some points of up to 999 millisieverts per hour. The government once tried to pour sand to shield this basement, but it was still not enough to stop the deadliness from within. Overall, hospital number 126 is currently a controlled tourist site within the Chernobyl exclusion zone. Many people who visit here and return say that the place is still very cold, and they can feel the smell of death still lingering around, as if the events of 1980 happened only yesterday. The third is Pennhurst Hospital. In 1908, in the remote Spring City area, the state of Pennsylvania opened a facility with a deeply humane name, the Eastern Pennsylvania State Institution for the Feeble-Minded and Epileptic. Initially, this place was designed as a self-sufficient paradise for approximately 500 people, with full farms, a power plant, and even its own theatre. Clearly, when looking from the outside, This place was an ideal model for caring for less fortunate lives. However, that paradise quickly turned into a living hell only 4 years after opening. The number of people confined here soared to nearly 2,800 people, which was more than 5 times the original design capacity. Can you imagine that not only disabled people, but also orphans, immigrants, and even criminals were thrown here to be isolated from society? In 1968, reporter Bill Baldini of the television station NBC10 conducted a shocking series of reports titled "Suffer the Little Children." This report recorded haunting images of patients chained to cribs, rampant violence, and forced medical experiments. The height of the cruelty was Dr. Jesse G. Fear, who was recorded as having intentionally used injections to cause extreme pain to patients as a form of punishment. The consequences of this brutality were only truly brought to light in 1974 through the federal lawsuit Haldeman versus Pennhurst. Everything began when patient Terry Lee Haldeman visited her family and her parents discovered unexplained bruises on the body of their daughter. The federal court then concluded that the conditions at Pennhurst were unsanitary, inhumane, and dangerous, directly violating the amendments of the United States Constitution. To explain this corruption, investigators at the time concluded that the pressure of accepting unlimited patients while funding and personnel became increasingly scarce pushed medical staff into a state of violence. They turned torment into a daily control measure within a system that completely lacked an independent monitoring mechanism. Finally, Pennhurst was eventually closed permanently on December 9, 1987. This event directly promoted the birth of the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. In 2010, the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization recognized this place as an international site of conscience. However, today this abandoned complex is used as a Halloween haunted house business based on fear, despite fierce controversy from the survivors of this nightmare. The fourth location on our list is Danvers Hospital. Danvers Hospital is located in the state of Massachusetts, also known as Danvers State Insane Asylum or Danvers State Hospital. The story began in 1878, when this hospital officially opened on Hathorne Hill. There is a chilling truth behind that, because this land originally belonged to John Hathorne, the most cruel judge in the Salem witch trials of the 17th century. For those who do not know, the Salem witch trials were a series of hearings and prosecutions of people accused of witchcraft in colonial Massachusetts from February 1692 to May 1693. At that time, many religions, including Christianity, taught that the devil could grant those called witches the power to harm others in exchange for their loyalty. And then a witch hunt took place in an extremely brutal way. Tens of thousands of people, mostly women, believed to be witches, were executed. Danvers Hospital was later built on the very area that had once tried and executed those who were believed to be witches. Danvers was designed in the Kirkbride style, with a shape that, when viewed from above, looks exactly like a giant bat spreading its wings to cover the hill. Initially, it was only expected to hold a maximum of 1,000 patients to ensure the best care conditions. However, humanity disappeared when the hospital population reached 2,360 people in 1939. Thousands of people were locked in narrow corridors, living in filth and even running around naked. To prevent rioting crowds, doctors had to use electroshock methods. However, when methods such as electroshock were no longer sufficient to suppress the overcrowded crowds, doctors here began performing mass lobotomies. Danvers was so notorious that neurologists at the time called it the cradle of prefrontal lobotomy. Medicine at this point was no longer about saving people, but about turning humans into soulless living corpses to be easily managed. The brutality left behind telling numbers full of blood and tears. In 1939 alone, as many as 278 patients died. By the early 1950s, horrific violence occurred so frequently that patients beat and murdered each other. This gloomy and deadly atmosphere caused the writer H.P. Lovecraft to choose Danvers as the prototype for Arkham Sanitarium in his works. Later, it officially became Arkham Asylum. It's the place that imprisoned the most insane criminals who faced Batman in the DC Comics world. In fact, the tragedy at Danvers was the inevitable result of chronic funding shortages combined with severe overcrowding. When there was no independent monitoring mechanism, absolute power in the hands of doctors turned medical experiments into inexcusable crimes. After more than a century of existence, the hospital closed in 1992. In 2001, the famous horror movie Session 9 filmed its entire setting here, taking advantage of its own eerie desolation. By 2007, most of the buildings were demolished to build luxury apartments. Today, only the original facade of the administration building and the silent cemetery containing thousands of anonymous souls still exist as a reminder of a dark medical era. Finally, there is the Manicomio di Racconigi Hospital. In 1871, in the centre of the town of Racconigi, an old building that was originally a military school was converted into a psychiatric hospital, with a massive area of 10,000 square metres spanning 3 floors. This facility was unusually located right in the middle of a residential area, instead of being pushed to the remote outskirts, as was common at the time. Its presence, right in the heart of the town, served as a silent reminder of what was happening behind those fortified walls. Things reached their worst point under the leadership of Dr. Oscar Giacchi, who held the position of hospital director from 1880 to 1907. You see, this doctor believed in a crazy theory that mental illness actually originated from the brain being compressed because the skull of the patient was too small. To prove this pseudo-scientific theory, he performed a series of surgeries to drill into and expand the skulls of those miserable patients. These were completely inhumane experiments and had no scientific basis at all. Not stopping there, the hospital also conducted forced electroshock, experimental neurosurgery, and isolated patients for long periods of time. During the period when the eugenics movement exploded in Italy, many patients were even subjected to forced sterilisation or were executed silently. A heartbreaking fact is that according to later studies, up to 1/5 of the patients locked here were actually not insane at all. They simply suffered from pellagra, a disease caused by a severe vitamin deficiency. The brutal reputation of this place was finally halted by the Basaglia law in 1978, the law that mandated the closure of all psychiatric hospitals in Italy. But it was not until 1981 that this hospital was completely closed, and the last patient only truly left in 2004. Today, this massive building still sits there, rotting and gloomy, right in the heart of the town. If you step into those crumbling corridors, you will still see dust-covered typewriters, rusted medical equipment, and the straitjackets for the insane still lying in their original state as vivid evidence of a dark medical era. The video ends here. If you like this video, please subscribe to the channel to watch similar videos and do not hesitate to leave suggestions for the next video in the comments section.